Have you ever watched a movie and wondered how it managed to look so good on such a tiny budget? Because that's exactly what happened when I sat down to watch Obsession. This is another example of how you don't need a massive Hollywood budget to make a great movie. According to reports, Obsession was made for around $1 million. To put that in perspective, the movie Avengers Doomsday is going to be coming in close to $300 million to make, and its lead actor, Robert Downey Jr., is set to make $150 million between both Doomsday and its already announced sequel, Secret Wars. Yet somehow, Obsession manages to make the movie look like it costs significantly more. The cinematography is excellent, the direction is confident, and the atmosphere feels authentic from beginning to end. The world really does feel lived in, and the locations are believable and nothing feels cheap. Now, according to Box Office Mojo, Obsession has grossed nearly $80 million worldwide. And that's because audiences have clearly noticed the really good investment that was made into this movie. Hey everyone, this is Chris Bolts, and I'm coming in with my review of Obsession. Now, before I get into the content, do make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. Now, what's even more impressive about Obsession is that it didn't have some gigantic marketing campaign behind it. It wasn't plastered across every billboard or shoved into every commercial break. Instead, it is succeeding primarily through word of mouth. And I believe it. When I went to see the movie with my kids, who are adults, by the way, I wouldn't recommend you take little kids to go see this movie unless you're a macabre set of parents. The theater was completely sold out. There was not one seat that was empty. And after watching the movie, it's easy to understand why people are talking about it. Because while Obsession doesn't reinvent its genre, it does take a familiar concept and presents it in a way that feels surprisingly fresh. The story centers around a man named Baron, often called Bear, who is hopelessly in love with a woman named Nikki. Only problem with this is Nikki does not love him back. Nikki completely friend zones Baron. Bear is so infatuated with Nikki though that he visits a witchcraft store to buy her a necklace, but instead he ends up purchasing an item that grants a wish. And in one of the worst decisions that might be made by a protagonist, he wishes that Nikki would love him more than anything in the world. And as soon as that wish is granted, everything begins to unravel because Nikki does exactly what that wish demands. She becomes obsessed with him. This is what you wished for, Nikki does say in the movie to Bear. And that's where Obsession separates itself from countless other romance gone wrong stories. The movie isn't really about whether Nikki will fall in love with Bear. It's about what happens when someone gets exactly what they think they want. Bear spends the beginning of the movie longing for Nikki's affection, then he gets it and it becomes a nightmare. And what I really appreciate about this film is how effectively it uses visual storytelling to communicate the emotional deterioration of both characters. There's a scene early on where Bear is shown in full color while Nikki is cast largely in darkness. At first, it may seem like a simple stylistic choice, but as the movie progresses, you realize it's laying the groundwork for what both characters are about to experience. Nikki is descending into madness because she's trapped by the spell. Bear is descending into fear because he's responsible for creating the situation in the first place. They're both losing themselves in different ways, and the contrast becomes one of the movie's strongest themes. One character is being consumed by obsession, the other is being consumed by regret, and the film constantly bounces between these two emotional states very effectively. Another thing I loved about this movie was the pacing of the psychological descent. The movie starts off relatively normal and comfortable, but then things slowly begin to feel off, conversations become awkward, character behavior starts feeling strange, moments linger a little longer than they should, the tension builds gradually instead of hitting you over the head immediately. That slow deterioration creates an atmosphere of unease that hangs over the entire movie, and the filmmakers make some clever choices to reinforce that feeling. There are moments where the music suddenly cuts out, scenes that feel like they're building toward one emotional payoff suddenly veer into something completely different. Characters say things that don't seem right, and they make decisions that feel unsettling. everything starts feeling unstable, and the movie wants the audience to feel uncomfortable, and it succeeds in doing that. What really impressed me the most is that so much of that tension comes from direction and editing rather than expensive special effects. This is filmmaking doing what filmmaking is supposed to do. If you guys grew up during the 80s or the 90s, we got a lot of this where filmmaking relied upon direction and editing and practical effects, and not so much on CGI or any type of computer generated graphic to tell the story. That's part of the reason why the movie feels so refreshing. In an era where many films try to overwhelm audiences with scale, Obsession succeeds by focusing on atmosphere. It trusts the audience, its actors, and the story. Now, my biggest criticism is that the story is fairly predictable. You can see many of the major developments coming well before they happen. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, because execution matters more than surprise. A movie can still be entertaining even when you know where it's headed. That's a shout out to The Mandalorian and Grogu. Go watch that video, by the way. But there were definitely moments where I found myself accurately predicting what was about to happen. The other issue was the ending. Not so much the ending itself, just the pace leading up to it. After spending so much time carefully building tension and developing the psychological horror aspects of the story, the final stretch feels rushed. It's almost as if someone walked onto the set and reminded the filmmakers, hey, remember this movie only cost $1 million, because once the climax arrives, everything starts moving very quickly. I found myself wishing the movie had taken a little more time to let those final moments breathe, to really explore the consequences of everything that had happened. But honestly, that's a criticism born out of appreciation. The reason I wanted more is because I was enjoying what the movie was doing. I was invested and cared about the characters and wanted to see where everything was leading up to. And I wanted to just spend a little more time with that final act. But considering the resources available to this production, it's not hard to be impressed by what they accomplished. They took a modest budget and created something that looks professional, feels atmospheric, and has audiences talking. And now that the movie has earned tens of millions of dollars, hopefully the people behind it get the opportunity to continue making films at a larger scale. The direction is strong, the cinematography is strong, the atmosphere is strong, the actors were talented, and more importantly, they understood how to create tension without relying on expensive tricks. At the end of the day, Obsession is proof that creativity still matters. You don't need a lot of money to make a memorable movie. You just need a compelling idea, talented filmmakers, and the ability to execute that vision effectively. Obsession delivers on all three, and for that, I'm giving Obsession an 8.5 out of 10. If you're a fan of psychological thrillers, slow burn horror, or movies that rely on atmosphere instead of spectacle, this is absolutely worth checking out. And judging by those box office numbers, I'm clearly not the only one who thinks so. But those are my thoughts on the movie. What did you guys think of Obsession? Jump down in the comments and let me know what you guys think. And make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And remember, this is Chris Bolt signing off, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy.